Let's set up our head control. I'll first start by closing out a few of these windows so we have more space to work with. Much better. Alright, let's go ahead and move over to our side view, and we'll use our line tool to create a rectangular spline, and we'll have that conform to our horse's head. No need to snap the spline at all. So we just create a very quick shape. Feel free to go to your modify panel and make some very minor adjustments. Okay, so at this point we can move over to the rendering rollout. Go ahead and enable thickness. We can recolor this to gold since it's centered. And then we can go ahead and rename this to CS Head 01. Let's go ahead and add this to our controls layer. And then at that point, we'll want to fix its pivot so it'll pivot from our head bone. So let's head over to our hierarchy panel. We'll go ahead and quick align the pivot. Great. Alright, so the next step is to link this. And that will be linked to our thoracic control. And now we can go ahead and reset the object and collapse. Okay, great. So there is our head control. It's now time to start connecting everything else to this control object. So here's our challenge. We'll need a way to control the orientation of the head without keeping the original offset of the head bone. So we want to directly connect the head's orientation to an object that we can link to our head control, so we don't have to worry about any issues that come along with using keep initial offset. Sometimes you might not get the best rotation. So here's a workaround that works very well. Let's go ahead and create a helper. Make it a point helper, and we'll also make it a box cross. We can bring the size up to 20. Alright, now we will align this to our head bone. So let's go ahead and use Alt-A, grab the head bone, and we'll make sure that we connect position and orientation. At this point, we can go ahead and rename this helper to PTDRV Head 01 and add this to objects to hide. Alright, so once that's in place, we can now take the head bone and orientation constrain that to our helper. We can grab the helper and now link that to our head control. So as we grab the head and start to rotate, I'll go ahead and switch this to gimbal mode. Switch over back to our rotate tool. If you find that the head's pivot isn't in the right spot, it's just a matter of going back to effect pivot only, and you can see that it will update the pivot of your control object. So that happens from time to time, but not an issue at all to fix. So you can see now we're getting some really good rotation from our head bone. All right, beautiful. Let's make sure that we have the head control frozen. So if you go to transform to 0 and you get this warning, it just means that we need to go in and freeze this object. So we don't want to overlook that step, because as we start to test this control, we'll need a way for it to go back to the skin pose. Okay, great. All right, so the next step then is to go ahead and link our end helper, that's neck end, to PTDRV head. So we're linking from one helper to the next. All right, so here's what we end up with. When we grab our head control and we start to move this object, you can see that, all right, the neck is being controlled. However, the head stays behind. Now let's go ahead and think about this. We have a few options. We can position constrain the head to our helper, but what's going to happen is the head will eventually separate as we pull this too far. So instead, what I like to do is have the head linked to the neck chain. So here's the behavior we'd get. You'll notice that once the head is linked, and we'll want that to be added to BNH. All right, so if we were to page up, we should grab neck H. And now when we grab the head control and start to move that, you'll see that it will no longer separate. So let's go ahead and test this out further. We'll want to grab our head control and just bring that all the way down. And you can see that now the horse's head is able to translate down far enough for it to be able to eat comfortably. Beautiful. All right, so I'll go ahead and use transform to 0 to bring this back. Let's go ahead and check our layers, objects to hide. Okay, it looks like everything's been added. How about our bones layer? Beautiful. And controls? Great. All right, well, that finishes up our head rig. Notice when we grab our thorax control, everything will follow just fine. Now, one thing I would like to do, and I think this is going to be a really neat addition, is to set up the neck in a way that will give us some very nice twist distribution as we twist our head control. So as we start to rotate in the z-axis, for instance, we'll get some very nice twist distribution, which will lead to some very beautiful deformations. So I'll go ahead and show you how to hook that up in the following lesson.